fights, and so on, you see a drop of 10% on average across all schools. For the pro-social behaviors, being very cooperative in class, liking school, not skipping class and so on, attendance rates, you see a positive increase of 10%. And the most fundamental finding, unexpected to me anyway, but really gratifying, is that when you look at the academic achievement scores of the schools and the kids where they have these lessons, you see an 11% increase in academic achievement. So it's a win-win-win, and the biggest win is that it's the schools where kids need this the most. The kids in the worst neighborhoods, from the most troubled families and the poorest education level and the family background, that is where you see the biggest benefit. There's another benefit too, and that is when it comes to work skills, when it comes to preparing kids for the workforce and making sure that they have the skills that businesses will need them to have strengths in. Right now, I have to say there's really a disconnect between what students need and what they're taught when it comes to workplace success. For one thing, almost everybody learns the skills, the technical skills they need for a job on the job, because every job is so different. You know, you need to have mastered this kind of software, you need to have this technical skill, depending on the workplace. Schools can't do that. They need to instead, as I said, teach children how to learn. And that has to do with the ability to be in that ideal state. But the specifics of the skills will be learned in the workplace. They'll be learned on the job. Every company does on-the-job training. So there's a fundamental human skill that kids need, which has to do with managing their own brain, if you will, managing their own internal state and their emotions, that they're going to need for success at work. And I say this as a criterion for success at work with a good deal of authority. After I wrote the book Emotional Intelligence, I did a follow-up book called Working with Emotional Intelligence. And in order to write that book, I had to look at data from hundreds of companies and organizations. The data is what's called a competence model. These are internal studies done by companies for their own competitive advantage, where they look at people in jobs of all kinds and see what star performers look like. Now, a star performer is someone who, by definition, is in the top 10% of whatever success metric makes sense for that job. And you compare the stars to the average, and in competence modeling, you do a systematic analysis to see what skills, abilities, or competencies the stars exhibit that the average worker doesn't have. The reason you want to know that is you want to hire people for that job that look like the stars. You want to promote people that look like the stars. You want to help people who aren't as good yet develop the strengths so they can be outstanding performers themselves. So that's why there's competitive advantage. But if you look at this signature of star performance across hundreds of companies and hundreds of jobs, as I did, something very intriguing emerges. If you look at within the data, what abilities that distinguish outstanding from average are based on purely cognitive skills, technical abilities, IQ, and you contrast that with those that are based on emotional intelligence, what you find is that emotional intelligence is twice as important as cognitive ability in distinguishing stars from average. That doesn't mean that cognitive ability doesn't matter or that technical skills don't matter. Of course they do, but they're threshold abilities. They're what you need to get a job. You need a particular level of IQ to be a top executive, to be a nurse, to be a doctor, to be a lawyer, to be an accountant. But once you have that ability, once you get the job and can keep the job, you're now working with and competing with people who are as smart as you are. So emotional intelligence, how you handle yourself, how you get along with other people, are you a good team player or are you a leader? That starts to define who is going over the course of the career to rise to the top. So for jobs of all kinds, these abilities are twice as important in predicting outstanding performance. The higher you go in the organization, the more they matter. So for top leadership, it turns out that 80 to 90% of the abilities that distinguish the outstanding leaders from the mediocre have to do with emotional intelligence, particularly actually with the social side, with the kinds of skills that 11-year-old was displaying on the way to the soccer game. Now, consider what this means for the competitiveness of a region, of a city, of a country. I've been to Singapore. It's a very interesting country. I don't know if any of you have visited, but it's a country that has zero natural resources. All it has is what's between the two ears of its citizens. It has the human abilities of those who live in Singapore. And what's intriguing to me is that Singapore is the first country in the world to mandate that every student will have social and emotional learning in their schools. Why? Because they realize that this is the kind of skill set that is going to keep Singapore competitive in the years ahead. So if Houston is to stay competitive in the global economy, if Houston is to thrive as a community, if Houston's children are going to grow into caring and responsible spouses, parents, and citizens, then I think social and emotional learning is a necessity. Thank you.